Good morning, Patty. Is your audio activated?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. I have a hard time knowing what day it is.
I know it's a challenge every day when we wake up as well, trying to remember. I remind myself to look at the date on my phone that I can remember what day of the week it is.
I have to change the date on the chart that we do our dogs' medications and feedings. So
Yeah,
that's how I figure out what the date is. But I still have a hard time with what day of the week we're on.
very good. For those that will be logging on today, I have the distinct pleasure and honor of interviewing the Lane County District Attorney, Patty Perlow. My name is Mark Molina. I'm the CEO of Molina Leadership and Business Development Solutions. And I want to thank you, first of all, for your willingness to meet. I know you're very busy right now. How are you doing?
Great. The office is, I have great people who have helped put plans in place on how to keep people who are working here safe. One of my team leaders initiated how to make remote court appearances work for the court and for us and the defense attorneys. And so we are forging ahead with they're just the in custody cases, but things are moving.
Very good. Now, you're in the midst of a re-election campaign. Again, we've spoken before. Your leadership is at another crucial phase, just like when you were appointed. You were appointed in 2009, post housing market crash. And here we are, you find yourself in another contested race in what is currently a global pandemic. And I would like to just for you to discuss a little bit. Now, last time you lost a third of your staff in 2012 post economic crisis locally. You had to triage many of your cases. What are some of the coincidences from that critical time in our community? What are some of the decisions making that are similar and new things that you're learning?
Well, that was a financial circumstance for the county as a whole. And so when a third of the staff had to go in 2012, we were making decisions about, I don't know how much detail you want, but at that time it was how to leverage the most money with what we had available. And so some senior staff was let go in order to keep the doors open and prosecute as many cases as we could. We still reduced the numbers by about 1,500 felonies a year at that time. And so that was strictly economic decision making, and it wasn't great public safety. It was just triage, as you described it. This time around, it's not just an economic situation for the county. It's an economic situation for the entire population that we're facing, that we have responsibility for protecting. It isn't just like the last time around, we lost some staff and how do we deal with it? Now we're dealing with how do we keep our community safe during a time when we don't have any control over what's happening. So different decisions are being made from every level, including who's going to go into the jail and who isn't, and making a public safety assessment on, those people who may be committing more crimes. People are at home right now, and so domestic violence and child abuse are, well, we know domestic violence is up because those cases are still getting reported. Child abuse isn't getting reported, and everybody's at home, not in school. And so figuring out how to make outreach to the community It's not, you know, it's not just a criminal prosecution, the cases come in. It is we are part of a public safety system. How do we get out to the community, how to keep themselves safe during this time, and what we have available to help them. I, I don't know where else to go with this. It's just that it is so very different in terms of how we fit into the whole public safety system.
One of the things that is most compelling as a citizen of the county, as a citizen of Springfield, as a former soldier, as a community leader, one of the things that has drawn my attention to you as our district attorney is the amount of the leadership responsibilities, the leadership struggles, the leadership burdens that you have carried. This is 20 years now, is that correct?
Well, for me, no, I've been in the office for 30 years. I've been the district attorney for just under 5 at this point. The appointment was in 2015, and then I was elected in 16. So the leadership that I was doing between like 2009 and 2015 was within the office.
That's right.
As the chief deputy, managing staff and budget. Since 2015, I've taken the responsibilities on as part of the whole public safety system and part of our whole community, not just managing the office. And the people of Lane County should be gratified to know that you have great leaders here and great people who are working together really well to achieve public safety.
So you were the chief deputy managing the office, and we're looking at the time that you started. A short time after law school, you were a young lady. Short time after law school, here we are. This time later, this journey of yours later, this professional development, this professional training. You've gone from learning to be an attorney to working in a court system to managing other district attorney, deputy district attorneys, answering to the district attorney themselves, to then leading the underlings, so to speak, of the employees of the district attorney's office post-economic crash, housing market here in Springfield. You go through a contested appointment, you have a re-election process, and I'm looking at your timeline, your professional timeline, and what I see is this amazing spectrum of leadership development and how you have continued to develop, how you continue to grow, how you have continued to have to learn in the midst of incredibly difficult circumstances, and you're still thriving. The Lane County District Attorney's Office is still growing. You had to make some hard decisions, and that's what leadership does, Patty. A lot of businesses are not going to come out of this. A lot of people are not going to, whose lives are going to be forever altered. And you face this economic crisis. You had to make hard decisions, and you made them. And you helped the Lane County District Attorney's Office meet their mission, meet their goals, serve the people. And I'm reading from my notes here from the last time we spoke. You were able to find grant money to keep, your organization was able to help find grant money to keep the organization viable. And here you are in a contested race again for your position. And you have this amazing track record and this amazing development as our district attorney, as a leader in our community. And I wanted just to say that because it is quite impressive.
Well, thank you for that.
And so I think it's important. You have a lot of, you have this message, this professional message, this personal message, this life message to the voters of the county as to why you're still in the position that you are and why we should believe in you. And I've just been really impressed. Here we are in a pandemic, and you're still managing those the court systems, the adjustments to the court systems, the video now. What did you call that? Just how the people are in custody now. You're managing video court cases, and I mean, I'm sorry, I'm feeling the stress. I apologize if I'm rambling a little bit because now my family's feeling the stress of this pandemic, and I'm listening to you describe all the adjustments that you're going through, and it makes me think of your stress, potentially the stress of the deputy district attorneys, the community as a whole. And so we need experienced leadership running our district attorney's office. How are your deputy district attorneys doing? How are they feeling? How are you, as a leader, helping them manage in the midst of this, all these crazy changes we're dealing with?
So that's a lot.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. Before we really had the shelter in place, I had already made a determination that only half of the staff was going to be coming into the office at any given time, and managed to get an agreement with AFSCME, because the clerical staff and victim services are all union represented, that we would be able, under these particular difficult circumstances, to change terms outside of the contracts and all. And AFSCME was great about working with us with that. The lawyers all have laptops and can be remote, because we have a requirement that initial charging documents have to be filed physically in the court with an original signature. There are always lawyers in the office for reviewing the incoming cases that are in custody, making the charging decisions, and the remote lawyers can make charging decisions, but obviously they are having to have somebody else sign the documents and physically file them. We're hoping that this will cause the court to come into the 21st century and allow e-filing for that, because it's not safe for the court staff either for us to be taking paper down to them. So we are managing by having really good people working here who are keeping the work flowing. All of the out of custody cases are postponed until after June, but we can't wait until June to start processing them, or it will be a tremendous backlog. So all of that work is continuing to flow while we're waiting for the court to reopen for all cases. And I know that justice is really being delayed for a lot of people during this time, because you know, so many people are being released from custody, and these cases are being put off until at least after the 1st of June. So we want to make sure that as soon as we are able, we are processing that work again, and getting victims the restitution that they're owed and the services that they deserve, and to ensure that the people who have been charged with crimes can get their cases heard in a reasonable amount of time.
So that's another interesting component of what's required of you as our district attorney is you have employees that are also unionized. So that's another key component of what skills are required. Now our DA's office has several departments. It's not just overseeing cases, criminal cases. You have medical investigations, you have criminal, family, juvenile, and victim services. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that is composed and how you manage all of those?
All right, so criminal prosecution is what everybody is familiar with. If you've watched Law and Order, you know the police investigate the crime and the district attorneys prosecute the offenders. But we also have a family law division that collects child support for Lane County kids, about $20 million a year. Victim services in Oregon, victims have constitutional rights, and so my office is tasked with making sure those rights are enforced. So victim services make sure that the victims of crime are notified of when proceedings are going to happen, are allowed to have meaningful participation in the process, and keep them informed and sit with them through proceedings. The death investigations is a function for the state medical examiner. We are really fortunate in Lane County that the state medical examiner has positioned a forensic pathologist, a doctor who does autopsies and death investigations right here in Lane County. And so my office pays for rent at the hospital at Riverbend to use their morgue. And I provide round-the-clock investigators to help determine cause and manner of death. So 3 full-time staff to do that, and then a host of part-time people who, because you can't manage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with 3 people, to help take some of the calls at night, weekends and all. And they're nurses, EMTs, people who are medically trained.
You said that the 3 full-time have investigators on hand, and they manage 12 to 1,300 per cases per year. Or is that per month? I don't remember.
So we have take jurisdiction, meaning my office looks into somewhere over 1,000, between 1,000 and 1,300 cases a year of deaths in Lane County. And it's unattended or unexplained deaths. So if somebody dies at home and they were under the care of a doctor and it's pretty obvious the medications that they were taking and all, that would not require an autopsy. But the investigators from my office would still write a report about what happened. If it was unexplained or unattended, then they would actually do an investigation of it and write a report. And it still doesn't mean that there might necessarily be an autopsy, because the one doctor couldn't physically autopsy over 1,000 people a year. But it does require an actual investigation, talking to their medical providers and their family to try to determine what the cause and manner of death was.
And I remember that department also has nurses and EMTs. What's the count on that? How many work for the county or are volunteers?
Well, they are part-time employees of the county, and at any given time, we generally have about 7 of them. Some of them work more than others because of schedule flexibility. Some of them may only, pick up a shift now and then. But it's great. They have constant training and communication, go over their cases with the paid full-time staff, so that we can make sure that it's a quality investigation that's happening for every family.
Very good. Now, the last time we discussed within the family law division of the district attorney's office or department, you have 4 attorneys, and they bring in approximately 20 million in child support on an annual basis. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And so how many cases does your office manage per year in that area of family law?
That is a really difficult number to assess, because when a child support case is opened, it's opened until the child reaches potentially age 25.
Okay.
So each year you get new cases, and these other cases are still open. They aren't all necessarily active. If somebody is making payments, then my office doesn't do any work on it. It's when people fail to pay or are in arrears that my office takes action. And so it's really difficult to give you a number on that. We do grant reporting, and the office gets incentives for doing good work. And so that's how I know the number is about $20 million, but I can't tell you how many individual cases that involves.
And these incentives come from where?
I'm sorry?
These incentives come from where?
The federal government runs through the state of Oregon to help fund the office, which is why we can have 4 lawyers working on this, because they do such good work that we continue to be funded for it.
Very good. Now, how do you go about, as a leader, what do you look for in those that would apply for service as a deputy district attorney?
Well, I think I told you this before. What I'm looking for is good judgment.
Yes.
Because We can teach somebody how to read a police report, how to physically file charges. We can even teach them the components of trying a case in front of a jury, but we can't teach judgment. And so the interview process involves asking questions that would help give us an indication of the person's perceptions and just how they might look at a case, or it's a lengthy process, and they go through a lot of vetting with pretty much the majority of the lawyers in the office to make sure that they would be a good fit here, as well as not bringing up any red flags while they're going through the process of interviewing, and we're making a determination of whether to make a job offer. And I think I told you, we have the prosecution clinic from the University of Oregon Law School. And so a number of the people I hire as deputy DAs come through that program. So we have a year to assess them and the work that they do. Some of them also come from clerking for judges. I was a judicial clerk. And so the staff has an opportunity to see interactions with the court, and just you get a sense of whether somebody would truly be interested in this work, or if they're just looking for a job.
Is it traditional or historical that the majority of deputy district attorneys come, they're fresh, maybe fresh out of law school or an internship, or would other attorneys from different areas want to come and apply to be a district deputy attorney that may be moving in that might be a little older?
So we have done some lateral hires from other DA's offices. I have had a couple of people want to apply, who have applied here, want to come in and work with interesting backgrounds. The problem is they're coming from bigger salaries in the work that they're doing, and coming into public service, I can't match those salaries. And so that's where you find out if somebody's really interested in the work, or if they're looking for, something else.
How much latitude are you given as our district attorney over the budget?
I am given, well, the personnel costs are the bulk of the budget. And so the latitude I'm given is if I have a vacancy, I can hold that vacancy open for a period of time if we have extraordinary expenses in another area. For example, if we're trying cases that have really expensive expert witnesses, I might hold a vacancy open in order to cover the costs that we weren't expecting in that way. But government budgeting is pretty specific.
Right.
So yeah, my latitude is in, if I have an extraordinary expense, I have to find the money or go back to the board and tell them why I couldn't make my budget.
And what is the budget for the Lane County District Attorney's Office?
About $11 million, and about $3 million of that is grant funding, and $8 million is general fund.
And you answer directly as our district attorney to the Lane County Board of Commissioners, is that correct?
I am not employed by the Board of Commissioners. I am elected by the people of Lane County, and so I answer to them. The board approves my budget,
okay,
and the county employs my staff, but I don't actually work for the Board of Commissioners.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because there's so much for us as citizens to learn about how our government is made up. And I think sometimes we can assume, which I did just then when you mentioned the budget, I guess I really presented the question wrong. Your budget is approved by the Lane County Board of Commissioners.
Correct.
That's your oversight.
There is a budget committee that meets.
Yes.
It's actually a really lengthy process. I submit a request for a budget. That process starts in January, and then the budget's generally approved for the whole county by June. And so we go through a process of presenting what the need is and why, and where any increases in expenditures are going, or where any increases in revenue are coming in. I mean, we do get money from the state of Oregon for providing discovery in criminal cases. And so sometimes, you know, there are increases in revenue. And so I have to adjust for that with the board as well.
So you come out, you're appointed in 2015. You're managing the office prior to that. In regards to the $11 million budget in your professional development to where you are now as our district attorney, what was that like for you to learn to manage that type of revenue, reading P&Ls, things of that nature?
So I have to admit that I went to law school because numbers weren't my very favorite thing. And so that was a stark learning process for me, is managing the money that's coming to the department and watching the expenditures. And as chief deputy, I started reviewing the bills that we were receiving each week and figuring out where that fit in, working with the accountant that we have here in the office to explain the budgeting process to me. And so I actually had to start from the beginning learning how to do that. And now I'm pretty proficient at it. I've been on a few boards where there have been some money issues. And so it's really important to have a thorough understanding of how to look at the cash flow and budgeting.
I think it's important I think that's important that's acknowledged, because it's part of the leadership development process, and understanding that we're not all good at everything and that we do have learning curves. Leadership requires learning curves. And I thank you for saying that, sharing your struggle and that process for you. And so I just think it's really important that in your office, people understand that your role is very broad, and it's not just criminal cases. It's not just people going to court. You have all this administrative management of a budget, of personnel, of cases, of employees that are unionized, the expectation of the voters, answering for the budget to the board, County Board of Commissioners. And so it's a very comprehensive picture that, speaking with you, even I didn't know or didn't understand. So it's significant.
Yeah, it is managing a medium-sized law firm and being accountable to the public. Nobody really enjoys coming to court for anything other than adoptions. Adoptions are happy, but yeah, so trying to weigh the fact that nobody is ever going to be completely satisfied with the outcomes of what happens in the criminal process. It is important to have really good management of the office and partnerships in the community to try to improve public safety for everybody here. It's been a great journey for me, and the relationships I've developed through this are just, you can't put a price or a measurement on the value of those, but the work that's getting done here because of those relationships is terrific.
Very good. Could you explain, we discussed this the last time, for those of us that don't understand the grand jury process, what does that look like for your office to manage?
So I think I told you, initially grand jury was created to have more transparency in criminal cases. It was the cases initiated in a courtroom, and so it was deemed that it would be better to have citizens coming in and making the charging decision. So that's how grand jury was created. It's a process where the 7 grand jurors, a witness, and a deputy district attorney, unless there's a court order otherwise, those are the only people in the room. And the jury listens to the evidence to make to make a decision of what charges will be filed based upon the evidence that's presented. We currently, because of COVID, have our grand jurors in a courtroom sitting more than 6 feet apart, and the witnesses are appearing by video, well, by computer means. It's not video recording, it's live, with the deputy district attorney also remote. Law enforcement is all just from their agencies coming into grand jury through remote means. Otherwise, the witnesses are coming to the office if they don't have the ability to remote in, and sitting in a separate room so that we can keep everybody safe. Then the jurors hear the evidence and make a determination of what charges there's sufficient evidence for, and that's what gets filed with the court. We now are recording grand jury. That was new. And so we have equipment in the courtroom now in the courtroom, because that's what we're using for the grand jury, and a grand juror is responsible for remembering to start and stop the recording.
Now, how often is the grand jury utilized? Is it only for particular kinds of cases, or how consistent of this is this part of your process?
So for felony cases, it requires either a preliminary hearing or a grand jury proceeding, unless the defendant agrees to just proceed on the initial charging instrument. And that happens a lot in Lane County, that defendants say, you don't need to take the case to grand jury, because generally the case gets better for us when we've brought witnesses in and asked them questions. And it might end up that more charges are filed, or more significant charges are filed. So the defendants oftentimes waive that right and proceed on the charging instrument. Right now, we're not having very many grand juries at all, because it's only for the in-custody cases that the court is continuing to process. Normally, the grand jury, we have 2 grand jury panels. The one downtown that hears all the general felonies would meet 4 days a week of varying hours, maybe 3.5 days a week. The second panel is the child abuse grand jury, and they hear all the cases of child abuse, physical and sexual abuse. And that grand jury is held over at the Child Abuse Intervention Center called Kids First, so that the kids can come into a safe place and not into this terrible courthouse.
Okay. We've talked a lot about the construction of your office and the cases. I'd like to change course a little bit, because on our conversation on the last time, I really appreciated your philosophy of what do you consider success? And you consider getting people out of the system as success. And that was honestly, Patty, that was the last thing I expected to hear from a district attorney, because I guess we watched, what do we know about the law but what we see on television? People win a case, good job, maybe a high five, a hug, or something like that. And it's so we're conditioned to think that that's what success is in the court system, but that is not your intention whatsoever as our district attorney. And I'd like to talk a little bit about, for you to talk a little bit about what you consider success and some of the implementation processes you put into place to help those that are currently engaged in the justice system, so to speak.
So I don't want to give the misimpression that success can't be a criminal prosecution. There are some people who do terrible things in our community and absolutely need to be held accountable for those acts of theirs, violent rapes, murders, and all of that. Those people are going to prison still. And then our hope is, after they've served their time and they come back to the community, that our reentry programs will engage them and give them some opportunities to change their course of behavior. But when we're talking about the programs that we have available here to get people out of the criminal justice system and keep them out, I would say our treatment courts are number one. And that is it's really difficult. These people are all high risk, and now we're seeing mainly, well, methamphetamine and opioids. It's hard to get people to engage in treatment. It's hard to get them to continue to come back to the program.
Mhm.
But those people who successfully complete the program, we don't see again. It's a minimum of a year. It's super hard work, but it's effective. And the same with mental health court. Mental health court was one of the goals I had when I took office, that we needed another way to address people with mental health issues. Well, the first year we couldn't get people to even come back to court. And so we expanded the programming that was available. It turned out a lot of people with mental health issues weren't coming back to court because they were unhoused and they were unable to keep track of basic daily living, let alone you need to be at court on Tuesday afternoon at 2:30. So getting programmed housing and all was essential in making that program work. And now we have actually had a number of graduations this year. It's been terrific. And those are people who have a support system in place at the conclusion and are out of the criminal justice system. We have a prison diversion program for repeat property offenders that provides intense supervision, mentoring programs, housing to meet the needs, to give them an opportunity to gain some skills, get a job. You know, all of these things are designed to give people who want out of the system a way to do it. And those are my greatest successes. When somebody is overcoming their own challenges themselves and going forward, getting their kids back, getting their families back together, working or going to school, that's a success.
I appreciate you making that distinction, that though there are those people that must be properly, diligently, legally prosecuted for terrible, terrible crimes. They must give an account of that and give account of those crimes. But also just the work that your department, your Lane County District Attorney's Office is doing in mental health, in drug court. Can we talk a little bit about Veterans Court?
Veterans Court, the people who are in Veterans Court are the easiest to get to follow the rules, because veterans are rule followers.
Mhm.
And so 100% show up rate is not a rarity in Veterans Court. Engaging in the programs, they follow the rules. They might not in the beginning believe they need help or that they should be there, but our graduates of the program are housed, they have treatment, they have support, and we don't see them again.
You know, I served as a mentor in the Veterans Court, and I'd go to the courts on Thursday, and the judge at that time would always celebrate the successes of the veterans. They'd have cake and drink, you know, punch or whatever. And I was amazed at a couple of things. One was how those veterans, once they were back in a measure of a structured environment, they were able to reorient themselves to success. And then many who were just struggling with TBI or traumatic brain injury or some form of PTSD, that was really at the root of what was creating their hardships. And I remember the mentors would walk some of them across the street to get paperwork filled out or to make copies, and how much they were struggling to do that. And I just wanted to say for the record that your philosophy of helping are these that are in this portion of the system that really do want to get out. If they can just get a hand up instead of a hand out, so to speak. The district attorney's office under your leadership is doing a tremendous job in this area.
Yes, the treatment courts, I wish we could expand them. We need sufficient funding to do that, and you know, everybody's fighting for the same pot of money, and most of that money is coming from the state. So hopefully we'll be able to continue and expand these programs because they really do work.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about you so people know you a little bit better. You are an Oregonian. You were raised in Hillsboro when it was a lot smaller than it is now. And you went to your undergraduate at the University of Oregon and as well as a graduate of the University of Oregon Law School. What was your undergraduate in again? I forget.
It was in political science. It
That's
didn't
right.
require any math.
Yeah. That's me in math with the homeschooling issues. I'm having to help my daughter with school, and she's 7, and I'm like, math still hates me. So
Uh, I don't, my daughter's a math genius, and I don't, she must have gotten that from my husband's side of the family because it did not come from me.
you went straight into law school post undergraduate, though, correct?
No, I worked for a year.
You
I
worked for a year.
graduated got my undergraduate degree, and then went to work in Portland for maybe was 2 months, 3 months tops. And then I went back. I had done an internship at the legislature, and I went back and worked uh, there until I entered law school in the summer of 1986.
Now, did you know right away post graduate completion that you wanted to go to law school, or when did you have that revelation?
Well, as my dad was a lawyer,
Okay.
and my brother is a lawyer, and so that really was something I was familiar with, but I wasn't sure that's what I wanted to do. And so that's why after graduation, I took that year to reflect on where I was going and what I wanted to do, and then ended up applying and going back to school.
And you graduated law school. You're officially a double duck.
Yes.
And so, talk to us a little bit about your clerkship.
So I think it was in May of my third year of law school. You meet with the judges and interview for a clerkship, and I was selected by Judge Spencer. He was a senior judge on the bench, and not the senior judge, that was Judge Allen. He was a senior judge on the bench, and so he was retiring in the fall. And so I started working for him in August of 1989, and then in October he retired. And so Kip Leonard was a district court judge. We had two courts back then, district court for misdemeanors and circuit court for felonies. And so Judge Leonard got the appointment to the circuit court position, and I was clerking for him for, gosh, it must have been late October until in December. A woman from the DA's office asked if I'd be interested in working here. And so my clerkship, I was the very first clerk ever released early from the commitment because Judge Leonard hadn't been the person who hired me, and he let me go. And so in January 31, 1990, here I was.
How quick was your progression from being? How quick was the progression from being a deputy district attorney to the point that you were chief deputy?
Well, I started in January of 1990, January 31, and I became chief deputy when Alex Gardner was elected DA on January 1 of 2009. So it was about 20 years before I was pretty close to 20 years before I made it to chief deputy. During that time, the progression was I was on the misdemeanor team initially, and then went to a general felony team, and then spent 1994 through 8 on major crimes team. 1998 to 2001, I was the lawyer for the interagency narcotics enforcement team, the drug team. And then after that stint, I went back to a felony team, and then I became a trial team leader in 2004. So I was a supervisor, a trial team leader until I became chief deputy in 2009.
Very good. And in your progression and in your leadership development, just out of curiosity, does a district attorney's office, how do they prepare someone like you as they're promoting you and progressing you forward?
So it's very different now than when I started. When I started, I came into the office and somebody took a big stack of files and dropped them on my desk and said, here you go. And I was in trial 2 weeks after I started. Well, yeah, 2 weeks after I started. My first trial was February 14th of 1990. We don't do that anymore.
Mhm.
We actually spend more time going over how to review a case and how to spot pitfalls and things. I went to what we fondly call baby DA school in the fall. And that was just sort of a fluke of the timing of my hiring. We do a lot of hiring of people who pass the bar and they get their notice in September, and then they go to baby DA school in early October.
Okay.
So that's why the timing is set up that way. And so you go to a week-long course about prosecution. Because we have the prosecution clinic for the U of O here, we have people who are teachers already working in the office to help mentor the new lawyers. The trial team leaders work with each other to make sure that they're sharing information so that the new lawyers are getting a consistent message on what expectations are. And it used to be that the misdemeanor, when I was on the misdemeanor team, we supervised ourselves. I was a supervisor of the team after having worked there for less than a year. We don't do that anymore. Now we have senior lawyers supervising and managing and making sure that everything is consistent and that people get the support they need to be really good trial lawyers.
I think it's important to recognize that your leadership development came when there was not a lot of, if support is the correct word or not, but there wasn't processes in place that there are now. And I'm listening to you speak and being a former soldier, I'm thinking she really did learn basically by baptism under fire, so to speak. You were put into a position, you excelled through hard work, I'm sure, and they just said, here you go, and you did it.
Right.
And
But I have to say too that, that was when we had district court. We don't have that anymore. So that we had that training ground that we don't have. And when I was on the misdemeanor team, it was really fun. I mean, there was this team of people with a a caseload that was huge. And the court would set trials, like one lawyer might have 5 set on a given day. And you had to have them all prepared to go. And we would be handing off files. If somebody had a trial scheduled and it didn't go, they might have been picking up somebody else's trial that day. It was just a totally different environment than what the young people here are working in. They don't have that training ground of district court anymore. So yeah, it's very different, but by the same token, we couldn't do that today.
so on the job training for sure then.
Yes.
Very good. Now, before Alex Gardner was Doug Harkleroad, is that how you
Yes.
say it? And then was Alex. I served with Alex on the KMTR advisory board. If I may, I'd like to know what it was like for you. I would only assume, respectfully, that it could have been intimidating or challenging to become a woman district attorney behind what were two very capable, powerful men. And you're asked to go through the appointment process. Someone believed in you. You submit your application. You're appointed by the governor. Is that correct?
Yes.
You went through, and that was a contested appointment. You had an opponent, or if that's the correct word, and then you had a contested race a year later. Is that correct?
Right. The May 2016 primary.
May 1000. I remember in 2009 when you got appointed at that time frame, and um, how did you feel coming into, I mean, you had this amazing development. There's no question, no question. What was it like for you post appointment to come into this leadership position, post economic crash, looking at all of these really hard decisions? What was that like for you? You were here. You are this leader of this amazing responsibility. How did you bear up under that? What were some of your thought processes?
Well, I have to say the the process of a contested appointment and a contested election makes you sit down and focus on why you want the job, why you should have the job, and what you're going to do in the job. And the first thing that I wanted to do was stop saying we can't do this because we don't have enough resources. And I wanted the message to be, what can we do with what we have? And so that that first spiral was the beginning of what this office has become now. And in fact, what the county has become is, okay, what can we do with what we have and how are we going to get there?
Your what did you learn? That was important. What have you learned about yourself as a leader, post contested appointment, post contested race, elected by the voters? Obviously, people believe in you because you have held your position, maintained your position with tremendous support. What have you learned about yourself as a leader through those processes?
I learned that you are capable of more than you think you are, and that you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are to give you good advice, and let them speak honestly to you about whether what you want to do is smart or not smart, and be a good listener. And so what I learned in developing myself into the position of district attorney is there's not really any place for ego, and be a good listener, and surround yourself with people who are super smart, and then they want to do the right thing with you, not for you, but with you. And I think that's the leader that I wanted to be.
You find yourself in another contested race right now. If reelected, that's another 4-year term. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You're going to have the year of the voter in this video. What would you like to say to those that will be voting in this election? What is your message to them?
My message is that experience really matters in this position, and honesty and integrity matter. And beyond that, um, this is a great community, and I've lived here my entire adult life, and in the state my whole life. And so my honor is to serve the public here. And that's why I continue to work in this office and why I put myself out there. If you've seen any of the things that have been in the paper recently, that it's hard to run for public office and put yourself out there, but it's important work, and I am wanting to continue the work that I've started here. So yes, we are very transparent. We honor all public records requests. Um, if I am elected, I will serve all 4 years as long as I'm not hit by a bus or we have a pandemic that takes me out. I don't have a retirement home in Arizona. I don't have any interest in moving to Arizona. So those are some of the things I would like the people watching to know.
I appreciate the expression that you are vulnerable. You do put yourself out there. I think that it's important for people to understand that it's really hard to be under constant scrutiny at all times. And once you have a record, it's easy for people to cast stones at a record. And so it takes a lot of courage. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate your courage. I appreciate your willingness to allow me to interview. I appreciate your candor and all of the questions and how you've answered yourself. I appreciate the way you've explained your philosophy and your thoughtfulness. You've discussed how your development process, what that is like. I think you're a great leader. I just want to say that as one community leader to another. Being a former soldier, I think of your development during the first Persian Gulf War in the early 90s. I was Fort Sam Houston, and they activated 50,000 soldiers from Fifth Army, and 20,000 soldiers came through my detachment to be trained or brought back on full-time military status. So 25 years old, I'm not only helping my unit mobilize a nation for war, but helping train the 20,000 soldiers that came through. And so I listened to your development, and I'm thinking, how significant and how irreplaceable that kind of historical perspective as to what you're doing now. And so I wanted to thank you. I wanted to thank you for being willing to stay in this process, making yourself available to the voters, to the employees of the district attorney office, as well as all the leaders that have placed their faith and confidence in you.
Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate your kind words. I appreciate your leadership. And I love to talk to people. And so when you gave me this opportunity, of course I would take that. Just like if anybody in the community wanted to have a cup, well, we can't have coffee now, but have a conversation, I would love to do it.
If anyone, Patty, wanted to contact you and your campaign team, how would they do that?
The easiest way is to go through the Facebook page, Patty, District Attorney Patty Perlow. I have a website, daperlow.org, that has a lot of information about me and the campaign as well.
Very good. And how is your family holding up with all of this?
Well, my children are adults living on their own, and so they are fortunately still employed. I recognize that that is not the case for many people in our community, and so they are still able to pay their bills and go to work. And my husband and I are very fortunate that we are able to still go to work and be employed. And so my family is, I'm very grateful that my family is in the position that we are in right now.
Very good. My gratitude to your husband for supporting you and allowing you to grow into who you are. And that's a significant example of the respect that you have for one another, and that's good to see.
Yes, we've been together a very, very long time.
That's even better. All right. Well, Patty, I thank you for your time today. And thank you for such a genuine interview. It's very sincere. And we're going to get this posted a little bit later today. And you can, it'll be on the Molina Leadership Business Development Solutions page. And you can, if you want to copy that to your website or to your page, you're more than welcome to do that.
Thanks. And like I said, good editing is everything.
Yes, ma'am. We're gonna look at it. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now I need to